Salam to one and all present here. We are indeed very privileged to have here with us today Dr. Usha Vasthare, giving a brief introduction, ma'am. Dr. Usha Vasthare is a highly esteemed neuroscientist who has dedicated her life for the study of the human brain. She has served as a faculty member at the Temple University School of Medicine in Philadelphia for an impressive 17 years. And during her tenure, she also played the crucial role of the Clinical Research Project Coordinator at the Center of the Parkinson's Disease and Movement Disorders in Pennsylvania Hospital, Philadelphia, USA. And Dr. Vasthare's contributions in the field of neuroscience are indeed commendable. She has published over 70 research papers and abstracts in various reputed journals, and her expertise has been recognized worldwide. Additionally, she has also made significant contributions in the medical education, contributing 5 books which are used in the continuing medical education courses. Dr. Vasthare's impact goes beyond, as also she has served as the academic research advisor, mentoring MDs, postdoctoral fellows, PhDs, and master students. But what sets Dr. Usha Vasthare apart is her deep-rooted connection with spirituality. From her childhood days, she has been an ardent devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. Despite a long and a successful career and a dedicated family life, Dr. Vasthare now devotes her time entirely for service activities both in India and abroad. And she combines her extensive knowledge of recent neuroscientific research with the profound spiritual wisdom encompassing the teachings of the Holy Trio, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Sri Sharada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda. Dr. Vasthare's talks and workshops beautifully weave together the realms of the science and the spirituality. Her enlightening sessions have been held in various spiritual and religious institutions, including ashrams and temples in Johannesburg, Durban, Ireland, Ladysmith, Baroda, Bangalore, Mysore, and Mangalore, and numerous other places, and the list goes on actually. And ma'am, we are truly very privileged and delighted to have you here. And ma'am, we also believe in the congregation of the both Para and Apara Vidya, and I'm very sure that you're an inspiration to all the students who are sitting here and watching us live, who perceive the research in the multidisciplinary approach and gets to know that this is more interconnected than anybody who would have thought about it. And as it is said that the neurons which fire together, wire together, we are very happy that you are able to come here in person. And I'm very sure that her expertise in neuroscience and combined with the profound spiritual insight which you have, we are going to have a very captivating and enlightening session. And she'll be addressing on the topic self-upliftment, confluence of neuroscience and spirituality. Without further ado, I request ma'am to please come over here and share her wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. Sai Ram, good afternoon to you all. As Devendra started introducing me and ended up with the Hebbian law, the neurons that fire together, wire together. I have a twist for that Hebbian law. That's how we'll start, confluence of neuroscience and spirituality. From the spiritual angle, you know what I talk about Hebbian law. People who pray together, stay together. That also we started with the prayer. So with that spiritual angle of Hebbian law, let us start today's discussion, I would like to say. This is indeed a privilege to be able to share my joy, not even knowledge. I'm just sharing my joy with you all, combining the recent advances in neuroscience research along with my other passion about our scriptural knowledge, ancient wisdom. So without much further ado, let's dive in. This is your world. What I mean is not just this campus. This campus is a very private world. The entire world is your world. And you have to shape it. And if you don't shape it, somebody else will shape it for you. What do I mean by that? It's very deep, right? If we don't shape this world and this world, somebody else will shape it for us. Which means our path to empowerment starts from within. not just this external world, the internal milieu, the internal world. So we need to shape first this internal world of ours to be able to shape the outer world. I think this is what Gandhiji has said, right? If you want to see the change outside, it has to start from within. This is nothing but self-upliftment. And for that, we are reminded of this Bhagavad Gita shloka. What else, right? Uddhare datmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanaha. That means we need to elevate ourselves using this mind of ours. And this mind of ours could be either our friend or our enemy. What does this shloka mean? We know this shloka. It's one of the popular shlokas in Bhagavad Gita. What does that mean from a neuroscience perspective is what we're going to understand this whole topic of self-upliftment through this shloka taken from a neuroscientific angle. So self-knowledge is nothing but empowering us. Knowledge is nothing but power, right? They say knowledge is power. So that self-knowledge is how we're going to empower ourselves. And this self-knowledge, knowledge about ourselves, to understand ourselves, why this mind works the way it does. We know we should be doing certain things. At times, it is not possible to do that, right? And we know we should not be spending too much time on certain things, but yet the mind sometimes goes in a different way. Why does this happen? To be able to understand ourselves is nothing but self-knowledge. When we do that, that is how we're going to uplift ourselves. So understanding ourselves is a prerequisite to be able to uplift ourselves. And that we're going to see both from a scientific angle and from the scriptural angle today. To be able to uplift ourselves, two factors are necessary. Of course, we need to know ourselves, understand ourselves. Just understanding ourselves is not going to be enough. That means, how does this brain works? What is this mind? Why is it like, it is like a monkey mind, right? And that monkey mind, we have to convert it into a monk's mind, highly focused. So, and knowing ourselves is not going to be enough. We need to master ourselves. And how do we master ourselves? This aspect we are going to learn both from the neuroscience perspective and also, as I said, from the scriptural perspective. And when we do this, this is the way we evolve ourselves into better human beings. Knowing ourselves. The first and foremost is about self-awareness. Our self-awareness needs to be heightened enough to know about our own thoughts, about our own feelings, our own emotions, our own belief systems, our own perception, our own memories. For all of this, self-awareness is extremely important. And you know what? Self-awareness is the most important quality of human beings. And human beings are the ones who have the highest or the heightened self-awareness. Only we have that capability to be able to think about our own thoughts, think about our own feelings, think about our own emotions, and think about our own belief system. Everything starts from the belief system. So the self-awareness is the most important quality that we need to exercise, that quality, function of our mind or the brain. Whether we know it or not, biologically speaking, we are all feeling beings. We are all feeling beings, and we think once in a while. When I say this, think once in a while, what I mean is but in a conscious manner, in a rational manner, in a deliberate manner. We think once in a while. Otherwise, most of the times we go with our emotions and feelings. This is how biologically we are built. But to be able to evolve ourselves, we need to be able to think deliberately, consciously, in a rational manner. Extremely important. But what is even more important is, when do we have to think first and act later and feel later? And when do we have to first feel first and then think later before acting? Extremely important for us to know the difference between the two. At times, yes, we need to first feel and then act upon it and then think later. I'll just give you a very quick example so that you'll be able to understand what I mean by that. You're just walking down the street and then you see a little kid crossing the road without saying this way or that way. And you also see from a distance a vehicle fast approaching. And then what do? You just have to feel and run to save that kid. You don't stop and think, oh, which direction should I pull this kid out to save? What should I be doing? None of that. You have to feel, act upon it. Whereas other times, when I think just that example is enough. Most other times, you have to think consciously first and then feel later. When is that? When you have to make certain decisions, and most of the decisions for that matter, you have to think in a conscious manner, deliberate manner, and then feel for it while you put it into action, then have the feelings, the proper feelings. We don't realize this. Most of us, we make decisions based on our feelings. And then later we think about it. Oh, I said yes. Will I be able to do this? And then we think about it. Rather than that, think in a conscious manner, logical, rational manner, thinking about all the pros and cons, make the decision. And then when we have to follow that up with action, then put all your feelings while you have to work on that decision. And we don't realize most of the time we are on the autopilot mode. I'm not saying making any value judgment here that it is right or wrong, none of that. But most of the times we are autopilot mode, except you're all students, may not be so much for you because you're learning something new the whole day. Then of course you're not on autopilot mode because you have to be using the conscious mind and the part of the brain that emanates the conscious mind. So when you're not in classroom, when you're not studying, if you observe yourself, most of the times we are on the autopilot mode. For example, when you get up in the morning, you know what you need to be doing, whether you have to brush your teeth or you have to pray first and then take a shower and then come for breakfast. What are you going to have? Do you going to have herbal tea or you're going to have milk? You don't think about all of these. You have already made a habit of all the things wherein you don't need to think. That is what I mean by autopilot mode. It is very efficient, saves lot of your energy, rightly so. If it is just with actions, it is okay, but we don't realize sometimes we have some innate biases within us. Biases, simply speaking, you can say certain prejudices, certain partiality towards certain things. biases. Without our knowledge, if we don't realize what our biases are, even the mind goes on the autopilot mode. Without thinking, we make certain decisions also like this. So we need to understand our own biases, and everybody without any exception will have certain biases. That is what we need to understand. We cannot be in a cocoon and say, oh no, I study in this university, I'm so open-minded, I don't have any biases. It does not work that way. You will see soon what I mean by that innate biases. We don't even know that they are biases. So all of us have certain innate biases that we need to be aware of, that self-awareness, because these biases will keep us in the quote-unquote survival mode. And if we need to be evolving, whether we know it or not, the very purpose of human life is to be evolving. How many of you understand Kannada here? Okay, I'm just going to say one line in Dasarapada. I will translate that to you, Shruti. It says, ಮಾನವ ಜನ್ಮ ದೊಡ್ಡದು, ಅದನ್ನು ಹಾಳು ಮಾಡಲು ಬೇಡಿ ಹುಚ್ಚಪ್ಪಗಳಿರ. That means being born as a human being is the greatest thing. And the reason to be born as human being is to keep evolving into better human beings. Because in the evolutionary tree, this is not the last stage. Yeah, physically, yes, all of this, but the evolution of humans is not at the physical level, or just like what we see when a evolved human being with big head and then big eyes, and none of that. Those are all for animation pictures and whatnot. We need to be evolving at the mental level, at the level of mind. That's why in scriptural knowledge it says, Sarvam Manai Eva. Everything is in our mind. So we need to be able to understand our own biases. And again, I'm talking from a scientific perspective, which means it is common for everybody. Commonality and reproducibility are the two features of science. So biases are not, oh, this is for somebody else, not for the students in this university. It doesn't work that way. Science is science. It's common for everybody. All of us have the same biases. To a different extent, it gets expressed in different people. So those biases within us keep us in the quote-unquote survival mode. In other words, the biases are what is preventing us to be evolving. In a different way, newer research is happening on what we call now as radical optimism. They have different interpretations and whatnot. That is a separate topic for another day, another time. But all of this is already said in our scriptures. Now I'm bringing in scientific terminology to be able to give what we already know, what is in ancient wisdom, using newer scientific terminology, which means it's going to be common. Otherwise, if it is our ancient scriptures, certain types of people, certain Hindus will follow certain scriptures. Other types of Hindus will follow different type of scriptures. All this differentiation, Vedas, will be there when we go into scripture, even though all the scriptures are still fine, everything is okay. It cannot be accepted by one and all. So, however, when we use a scientific terminology, it becomes common for everybody. That's the benefit of combining neuroscience and scriptural knowledge. So, to know ourselves, not only our self-awareness to be heightened, and we also need to figure out a way to overcome these innate and non-conscious biases that are already within each and every human being. That is about knowing ourselves, and then how do we master ourselves? You know, we all know that anything you want to do, they say first you have to change your mind. You change your mind first and everything will happen. You have heard about that, right? But I say as a neuroscientist, just changing mind is not going to be enough. Because we can change our mind flippantly, like, oh, do you want pizzas today for lunch like we had? Or South Indian food? Which dessert? Is it cake or the kheer, right? We can change our mind like that. I'm not talking changing our mind in that flippant manner, but in a highly focused, concentrated, effortful, deliberate ways. When we change our mind over a period of time, changing our mind will result in changing the very structure and function of the brain. This is extremely important. This is what we call that as neuroplasticity. We will go to that in a few minutes. So just changing our mind is not going to be enough. We need to be able to change this hardware, the brain itself, not just the mind, the software, but the brain itself, so that we can master ourselves, we can uplift ourselves, we can be empowered, we can be transformed. Which also means we know why we want to change our minds. We have to have positive attitude, right? Positive mind. So again I say, just having positive thoughts are not going to be enough. Those positive thoughts have to be followed by positive feelings. Feelings are very, very, very important. But still, having positive feelings are not going to be enough. Both positive thoughts and positive feelings need to be followed by actions. Change in our actions, changes in our habits, changes in our experience. Extremely important. Then and only then the structure of the brain will change. Otherwise, we will just remain at the level of changing our minds. So as I mentioned, that whole process is called neuroplasticity. And to implement this whole thing, to master ourselves, you know, as Vivekananda puts it, very simple terms. Be good and do good. So simple. You cannot get anything simpler than that. Just 3 words, right? Be good, do good. Yes, 4 words, but good repeated, gets repeated twice. So knowing ourselves and mastering ourselves is the beginning. Now let's go a little bit deeper into how can we know ourselves from a neuroscience perspective, neurological and neuroscience perspective. So we need to understand this brain of ours, which is like the, very simply put, if I have to compare the brain to the hardware of a computer and of course the mind to the software, we all know that. It says all the power that we need to be evolving is already within us. That's why that empowerment to change that world outside, it has to start from within. What do I mean by this? All the power is within us. We have heard about this all the time, right? Let me bring a mathematical way of understanding this expression that all power is within us. You're all aware of the neurons, right? You've all heard about one type of brain cells, neurons, and of course there are other types, supporting cells, glial, astroglial, all of that. We won't get into that. Let's just stick to neurons, okay? You know, in science we know If we don't use it, we lose it. And if we didn't need it, it would have become vestigial, right? Whereas in humans, look at the number of neurons that we have. The way to understand the number of neurons, if I just put in 1 and then followed by so many zeros, I'm not in the field of finance. I won't be able to tell counting how many millions and billions. So I have figured out another way of expressing that. Let's start counting the neurons of an adult brain, okay? And let us say it takes about 1 second to count one neuron. If I say count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it would have taken 5 seconds. So let us assume that it takes 1 second to count each neuron. You know, it takes literally over 3,100 years to count all the neurons that we have. And I know with your expression, if I were not to be a neuroscientist, you would not have believed me. You would have to believe me based on faith and not on logic and data. But that is, I'm only talking about single neuron, just a number of neurons. And the Hebbian law, the neurons that fire together, wire together, that means each neuron can communicate with many neurons. In some regions of the brain, each neuron can connect up to 10,000 other neurons. Each neuron, mind you. And in some other regions of the brain, each neuron can connect up to 100,000 other neurons. So you go figure it out. The immense potential that we have. That is how the neurons communicate with each other. If just the number of single neurons, it's so hard to comprehend, and imagine the way the neurons can communicate with so many hundreds and thousands of neurons. It's really mind-boggling. Really mind-boggling. That is that immense power that we have. And not only that, the brain, even while we are sleeping, it is always on. The brain is always on the on position. So that is the potential that we have. And another way to look at it, or ourselves, is this brain of ours is like the biggest pharmacy that you can think of. Why? Because every thought you get, every emotion and every feeling will release a chemical. So much so, this brain is like the biggest chemical factory, not even a pharmacy. And knowing this, understanding this, we can actually take care of our own mental health issues. Because many of the mental health issues are caused by imbalance of chemicals in the brain that we know. It could be depression, it could be anxiety, it could be bipolar. All of these are because of the chemical imbalance. Once we understand how we can regulate, not control, how we can regulate our own emotions, how can we train our own emotions, we will be able to change that chemical imbalance in the brain so that this knowledge itself can act as medicine for us. The third aspect we need to understand about this brain of ours is this brain acts like a magician, like a genie. This brain is literally waiting for every command that you give it to the brain. Except just like the small print, the only thing is we just have to, we can ask the brain anything that we want, except that we have to follow it up with action. Whatever wish that you have, you ask. But once you follow that up with action, that is how the brain can work like a magician. Because many times we don't realize this. We have lot of wishes. We have lot of hope. Wish is the second stage. Hope, we hope for the best. That is very, very vague term. And then hope gets converted into wish. But just wishing, the brain will not work like a magician. Those wishes have to be converted into goals. Our wishes, our ambition has to be converted into goal so that we can work towards the goal. And that is how the brain acts like a magician. With this, let's go a little bit deeper about understanding ourselves. You know, in neuroanatomy in medical schools, neuroanatomy is taught for one whole semester in US. And I don't know here in this medical college, in Bangalore Medical College, neuroanatomy is not even a separate subject. It's just small part of the anatomy itself. But in US, neuroanatomy is taught for so many months. We don't have to be worried about any of that. I'm not going to use any Greek and Latin words. I have made it even simpler for us to just remember different parts of the brain so as to help us to implement in our daily lives. We don't have to be technically, scientifically using those terms. For implementation purposes, I have classified the brain into two parts. Yes, the first thing that comes to my mind is right and left, right? That's one way. Many a times we still use it, but it is becoming obsolete. But let's divide this brain into two parts, higher center and lower center of the brain. Higher center is where we think in a deliberate manner. The conscious mind comes from this higher center of the brain. Conscious mind, deliberate mind, rational mind, logical mind, all of that is coming from the higher center. Whereas this lower center of the brain, all the functions of our body, be it respiration, digestion, blood pressure regulation, blood glucose regulation, all of that goes on in an automatic way. We don't have to think about it, right? And it is the same way, even in animals, it works the same way. So that is what we call that as lower center. And this whenever we are on the autopilot mode, that means the habits that we have is coming from the lower center. We are on that autopilot mode. Whereas all the powers of conscious mind, starting with self-awareness, discerning power, viveka, what is right, what is wrong, what is good and what is evil, and our free will, all of this emanate from the conscious mind. So the same thing I have in the next diagram, combining both mind and brain. The conscious mind coming from the higher center of the brain, as you see, and the habitual mind. I like to call that as habitual mind rather than subconscious mind. And I would like to call that as non-conscious rather than subconscious. These are newer terminologies that we can use that comes from the lower center of the brain. And when we hear people saying, oh, I'm so stressed out, that is because the lower center of our brain, which acts the same way in other animals, including the reptiles, because there is one small part of the lower center of the brain, it is also called reptilian brain. So whenever we get stressed out, it is the lower center that is being active. And we will get to what those ants are in a moment. So, to have a healthy mind and to master our mind, we need to keep this lower center of the brain less active, because that is where the stress response comes about, when the lower center is active. And we need to be using the higher center of the brain more and more and more and more, because this part of the brain is what makes us human. And this part of the brain is what differentiates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. So even knowing all of this, we kind of know, but equally important is to know what is it that is preventing us to be using the higher center of the brain when you are not in the class, not when you are not a student. Still we need to be using the higher center more and more, right? What is it that is preventing us to use this higher center? This is what I initially talked about, that we all have, without any exception, some innate biases within us. What we call it as negativity biases. There are many, many different types of biases, even many types of cognitive biases. We won't go into any of those details. If we just understand the biases in a broad, general manner, that should be enough for us to be able to train our mind right now. So because of these negativity bias, we get what we call as automatic negative thoughts, what I have depicted as ants. You take the first letter, it becomes an acronym, right? Automatic negative thoughts. Because of this negativity bias, our brain and mind acts like Velcro for anything that is negative, be it negative thoughts, negative emotions, negative feelings, negative memories, negative perception, negative belief system. Our mind holds on to it like Velcro. This is in an untrained mind, or most of the times this is how it works. Until and unless we are aware of it and deliberately we change this. Whereas for anything that is positive, the same mind and brain acts like Teflon. Teflon is that non-stick material that you see in, on the non-stick pan, right? It gets washed off. Even if you think about it, during the whole day there will be so many things happening. But what sticks to our mind? Something that was negative. Either your friend or somebody said something that was not right about you, and that is what sticks in our mind. So to be able to understand this, recognize that through the self-awareness, and to be able to change is what CBT is all about. And not just change at the thought level, behavior. It has to result in change in our behavior. That itself is a therapy. That is a tool to be able to get out of this bias. Let's go a little bit deeper into these ants and see what happens. Because of these ants, from now on I'll just call these as ants, automatic negative thoughts. Our mind works even otherwise, but especially when we have a lot of ants, our mind acts like pendulum, going back and forth between past and future. And when that happens, we look at past with regret, and we look at future with full of anxiety and pessimism. And whatever is happening in the present moment is not enough for us. In other words, these ants prevent us to be in the present moment, here and now, now and here. And even if you are in the present moment, it is unsatisfactory. And because of that, what happens? Even though we know we want to be changing, it is not that easy to change ourselves. And we know we have these responsibilities, we need to be taking care of these things, but we shun away from the responsibilities. And we know we need to be proactive. This is what we did. or we usually do during New Year resolutions, and it hardly stays for a couple of weeks. And it's tough for us to be proactive. It's all because of the ants. And it is hard to learn new things. There is always resistance to learn something new. Because, oh, I thought this is the way it works. This, what she's saying is something different and new. So there is resistance. And we have everything and we have certain plans, but yet we cannot be what we want to be. And we are not as happy or as successful as we would like to be many a times. It's all because of the consequences of the automatic negative thoughts. These ants are what prevent us to uplift ourselves, which also means hard to be evolving. So we stay in that survival mode, stagnation. We might be highly successful, still we may not be evolving. But you know, there is no magic colored pill that comes in a white bottle that we can take it in to get rid of this negativity bias. It's only through awareness and knowledge can we come out of this. So how do we overcome these ants? Simple method. What do you see here? A sculptor, right? He is sculpting out Anjaneya here, Hanumanji. Now you can actually see the image of Hanuman. Before that, it was a huge, big block of stone, right? What did he do? He didn't bring anything. The sculptor did not bring anything from outside to carve out Hanumanji. Whatever was not Hanuman in that big block of stone, he took it off. And what remained is Hanuman, because he could see Hanumanji even in that huge big block of stone or marble. So this is the concept of neurosculpting. We all have to become neurosculptors of our own lives, to sculpt out all the unwanted thoughts, emotions and feelings, these ants. If we sculpt out, take away those ants, what remains is the real us. What is that? We will see in a few minutes. For a sculptor, you know, the big block of marble was outside and he had to use the tools like hammer, chisel, that was also outside, and the sculptor was different. But here it is 3-in-1. Tools of a neurosculptor, we all have to be neurosculptors, all of it is in one. We are the marble, our brain is the marble, right? And we are the sculptors. We have to chisel out. And what are the tools? Those are the tools that we use. Our own mind is the tool to chip away the ants. And what do we become? That is nothing but the sculpture itself. So all the 3-in-1. And we need to train ourselves to become neurosculptors of our own lives. This is what we say in Kannada. Ninna jeevanakke neene shilpi. You might have heard this statement. Literally, scientifically, this is what it means. Why is this important? When we do this neurosculpting of ourselves, it actually changes the brain itself. As I have said earlier, just changing the mind is not enough. We need to change the very structure and function of the brain. And that is what has been talked about for the past couple of decades. Dalai Lama was crucial in this new field of research, in neuroscience research, and because of his challenge to the Western neuroscientists, we probably don't have the time right now. I will conclude in a few minutes, because if I go into depth about how this challenge, Dalai Lama's challenge to the Western neuroscientists to be able to understand everything what I'm saying, it's a little bit longer story, but to cut it short, all it means is Dalai Lama was responsible for this, especially this research in neuroplasticity. He said just changing mind is not enough. You need to be able to change your brain in order to change your life itself. So until then we were only talking about mind control, from mind control or mind training to brain training, so that our life can change. This whole process is called neuroplasticity. In other words, if we change our thoughts, which is nothing but changing our mind, is changing our thoughts, changing our feelings, changing our perception. If we change our mind in a conscious, deliberate, rational, effortful ways, it leads to changes in the very structure and function of the brain. As long as changing our mind will result in change in our experience itself. Changes in our experience, changes in our habits, changes in our actions. That is when long-lasting changes in the brain itself can happen. Actually, if you come to think of it, this whole process of neuroplasticity starts from a single thought, but it has to end with action, repeated action, again and again and again, until it becomes a habit to be able to make transformation in our lives. There is a short video. I can give you the link. You can look at the video by yourselves. I'll conclude and take up the questions, which is more important than showing the video. So with all of this, putting the two together, the neuroscience way of looking at things and the scriptural way, let us see how we can put the two together. So scriptural angle, I have taken two angles, shlokas from Bhagavad Gita and what Swami Vivekananda talks about. As I said earlier, this shloka we have already talked about, that our own mind can be either friend or foe or the enemy. We need to make this mind of ours to listen to us by using our buddhi. Mind is from the lower center of the brain, buddhi is from the higher center of the brain. Using our buddhi, we need to make the mind listen to us so that it becomes a friend. The next shloka, which whatever I have explained in the scientific manner, is said here. Bandhuratmat manastasya enatmaivatmana jitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvatu. So, making our mind as a friend is everything. As I said, sarvam manai eva. If we can make this mind listen to us, not, when I say us, the higher center of the brain or the conscious mind or the buddhi has to, the mind has to listen to the buddhi, not the other way round. If those two shlokas will help us understand the mind from a Bhagavad Gita perspective, what does Vivekananda say? Look at this. He says, realize your own true nature, true self. And that's all there is to do. Know yourself as you are, the infinite spirit. And that is nothing but practical religion. And everything else is impractical, and for everything else will perish. As long as we know we are that infinite spirit. Even to put it more simply, this is all we need to know. This is what I call this as Viveka Vedanta, which is we are all divine beings. ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರಲ್ಲೂ ದಿವ್ಯತೆ ಅಡಗಿದೆ. We are all divine beings, number one. Second, the goal and purpose of human life is to manifest this divinity that is already within us. ಈ ದಿವ್ಯತೆಯನ್ನು ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸೋದೇ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನುಷ್ಯನ ಜೀವನದ ಗುರಿ. And the third, which is happening every day here, is the goal of human life is also to help manifest the divinity in others also. ನಮ್ಮ ಜೀವನದ ಗುರಿ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋ ದಿವ್ಯತೆನ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸೋದು ಮಾತ್ರ ಆದರೆ ಸಾಲದು, ಬೇರೆಯವರಲ್ಲಿರೋ ದಿವ್ಯತೆಯನ್ನಲ್ಲೂ ವ್ಯಕ್ತಪಡಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಸಹಾಯ ಆಗಬೇಕಾಗಿರೋದು ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಗುರಿ, ಮನುಷ್ಯನ ಗುರಿ. ಈ ಮೂರು ಆಸ್ಪೆಕ್ಟನ್ನು, ದಿಸ್ ಇಸ್ ವಾಟ್ ಐ ಕಾಲ್ ದಿಸ್ as ವಿವೇಕ ವೇದಾಂತ. Of course, that is because that is how Vivekananda has put it in very simple terms, the message of the Upanishads. In such simple terms he has put, and for this to know we need that Viveka, the discerning power. Just as they say in Viveka Chudamani, we need this Viveka or the discerning power to understand this. So that Viveka Vedanta has double meaning. So when we do that, and if we can think that infinite power, that infinite knowledge and this indomitable energy, what we call that as Atma Bala, along with the Guru Bala, again extremely important. Only when you have this, that Guru Bala is not based on our what you call horoscope. That's not the Guru Bala I'm talking about. I'm talking about the real Guru Bala, in person Guru Bala, or the Guru that we have as person. So that indomitable energy is nothing but that Atma Bala and that Guru Bala that lie within us, and we can bring out that power. Then anybody can become like either Vivekananda or Buddha or India. This is nothing but upliftment. This is from and evolving from the scientific perspective. And he said it in very simple terms. All power is within you, and you can do anything and everything. So to conclude, I have few tips for you all students. This is going to be extremely practical for you all as students, not just for students really, this is for each and every one of us. All we need to do is to learn how to learn, because whatever we are learning, and especially with technology, in 10 years it will become obsolete. And there is so many newer discoveries that it's so tough to keep up on that. The only way we can keep up on that is if we learn how to learn. It's not learning about subjects. If we learn, how do I learn this? The techniques and the ability, the mechanics of learning, how to do that. Have a clear mind without any biases. All of this, once we understand the mind, that is when we know how to learn to learn. When we do that, that is when we become future ready. There is no way any of us, not just students, even retirees, if we don't keep up on top of things, we lose out. That's how we become future ready, and we become lifelong learners. And also specifically for students, and again not limited to students, broaden the whole purpose of your education beyond competing with others to get good grades and a good job. Widen the scope of education so that it becomes man-making and character-building education in the light of spirituality. And this is what Swami Vivekananda has talked about in a different way. Education is the manifestation of perfection that is already within us. We are already perfect. We don't know that. Not only we don't know that, but that perfection is covered up with lot of biases which we need to remove. That job is nothing but the polishing of the mirror. So to end, I'm going to end with a story. Who doesn't like a story, right? I'm going to end with a story to again say, how do we uplift ourselves? This is a story of 3 stone cutters. This is a remote village and some construction work that is going on. A stranger from the nearby village comes over and then asks the first person who was cutting stones, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Can't you see I'm cutting stones?" So he goes to the next stone cutter and asks the same question. And the second person says, "Oh, you know what? I have a family to feed, my parents and my wife and 2 kids, and this is the only job I know, and I'm doing a very good job of that, and I like this job." He says, "That's great, you keep doing." And he goes to the next stone cutter and asks the same question, "What are you doing?" And then the third stone cutter says, looks up and says, "You know what? Somebody is building a temple in this village. And once this temple is done, now it might be a small village, nobody knows. But soon people will start coming, and soon they're going to be shops, fruit vendors, flower vendors and whatnot, because of the temple. I am part of building this temple," he says. Same question, 3 different answers. Same salary for all the 3 stone cutters. One did not get more than the other. I don't have to ask you, all of us like the answer of the third stone cutter. Mind you, all the 3 answers were correct. No right or wrong, all the 3 answers were correct. And now, instead of stone cutters, we can change that to 3 students. When somebody asks, "I'm here, of course, to do my MCom degree," that could be the answer. The second, that will be the first stone cutter's answer, right? Or the second stone cutter's, "Oh, I came here to do my BSc and then MSc and then PhD because of the faculty that's here, the type of research that is happening, and I love to do this." That's also correct, that's great. Or we can be the third student, which encompasses all these 2 and much more. I'm here to study and to evolve, to become a better human being. Not just study and go elsewhere just to get a job. I'm here even to learn how to love, even to learn how to love God first, so that I can learn to love other people too. And just loving God and loving other people is not going to be enough. As Baba says, we need to serve all too. Love all, serve all. Then we become that third stone cutter or the third student. All it takes is a perceptional change. No extra work that is necessary. Change in our perception up here. I'm just going to end with that quote. This is what helps with uplifting ourselves. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd like to take. Yeah.
First question, I just like as the presentation was going on and there was some research going on Dalai Lama. So I had a similar question before also. Like we say many of videos we go through YouTube or everywhere. They say right now the research is going on this Sanskrit or Upanishads, and they say every word has some kind of influence because our brain being, as you said, a chemical factory, a brain of full of emotions, and every word triggers something. So what is the result of when we listen to Upanishads or something spiritual? What is there any answer for it?
Absolutely. That's a separate topic in itself. And there is also talks on the YouTube. If you go to Yogakshema YouTube channel, there are certain talks that are uploaded, and elsewhere too, talked about neuroscience of meditation and neuroscience of japa, how japa and meditation will change the electrical activity of the brain, what kind of waves will change, and the neurochemical changes that can happen, and neurobiological correlates of japa and meditation. It's an entirely different topic in itself, but you can take it from me. There are going to be changes, positive changes that can happen. But this neuroplasticity, we need to be able to really understand this. This is both for good and for bad. If you take up some habits and then see, for example, let us look at the terrorist brain and another monk who has done lot of japa and meditation, trained their minds. Just looking at the scans, we won't be able to know which is the monk's brain and then which is the terrorist brain, because a terrorist has such willpower, he would have trained his mind in such a way it will be as good if not better. It's always the intent behind the training, and the actions that we do is going to be what is important. That is why the brain scan studies are very, very crucial and important. In my opinion, as a neuroscientist, it still has limited value. Yes, we need to prove all of that. For proving, for academic wise, that is fine. But until and unless our intent is pure and the actions are correct, none of that will matter. That's why I always say, learn how to do things right later. But first, learn how to do the right thing first. Do the right thing first, and to do things right can come little later. Because to do the right thing, it involves ethical perspective, right? And even if you're not doing things right, it will come to you. You will learn as you go on in life. To be doing the right thing, you won't be able to see the difference by just looking at the scans. This is what we were discussing, Shruti. Yeah.
So maybe can we call this japa or the Upanishads, reading Upanishads, as a positive way of mind sculpting?
Oh, absolutely. But even there, it has to result in the action, because you're all quite young, and whenever we go to spiritual retreats, always the question is, we've been doing japa for so many years, but I'm still like this, I'm still like that, is what the questions ask. So it is not, because whether it is japa, it is nothing but repetition of a cognitive cue. Scientific definition of japa is that, or an affirmation. Repetition of a cognitive cue. It has to be done at a conscious level, not at the mechanical level. If you keep repeating just like a habit, then there is no difference between repeating multiplication table and japa. The power of japa is to be able to understand the meaning. But still, even if you don't understand the meaning, even kids can do the japa. Even that has a lot more power than repeating the multiplication tables. Definitely, I'm not saying that it won't have an effect. But understand the japa and repeat it in a conscious manner, not in a mechanical manner, it has lot more effect. even when repeated in a mechanical manner, it still has the positive effect. But we can increase that power by understanding the meaning. That is why you have classes where you can take Upanishads, not just recite the Veda mantras. That is the beginning stage. We all have to learn to repeat the Veda mantras, but after that, if we don't understand the meaning and keep repeating, we won't have the kind of changes that we would like to see in ourselves. Good question. Yes.
Actually, I wanted to understand how to identify, is this a thought from, how to identify our thoughts? Is it from a buddhi or is it from lower brain?
It's definitely from the buddhi. When you say identify or thinking about our thoughts, we have a thought that comes up. And you have to think about that. When that is from the buddhi, which comes from the higher center of the brain. That is why we call that as metacognition. We have to develop these skills. We call that as metacognition skills. We have to be able to think about our thoughts. Thoughts are fleeting. The same way we need to be able to think about our feelings, our emotions, our belief system. Many of the times, just changing the thoughts are not enough. We need to go to the root cause, the belief system. If we don't change the belief system, if we just work at the level of the thoughts, that is why there will be temporary changes. Until and unless we get to the bottom, the belief system itself has to change and everything else will fall in place.
Our intention should be pure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that intention, how do we say from the scriptural angle? This is what we call that as Chitta Shuddhi, right? And how does Chitta Shuddhi happen? Or even much more than how does it happen? Chitta Shuddhi here is getting rid of the ants, getting rid of the biases that we have, is what brings about Chitta Shuddhi. Yes.
I have a question which has come from other campus. Is there a specific time frame during which neuroplasticity begins and concludes in our life?
Great question. Yes, absolutely. When you're young, it's really, really fast and quick, but we don't need to worry. We can make use of this neuroplasticity until our last breath. This is the most hopeful thing that you can think of. Yes, it becomes little bit harder as we age, but definitely, that is why I say, evolving in humans is not a stage to reach. It's not reaching the stage of Jivan Mukta stage and then you will be a Jivan Mukta forever. From the scientific perspective, this evolution is on a moment to moment basis. And it is until our last breath we can be evolving. That is so hopeful. Great questions.
Ma'am,
Yes.
I have one other question. What are the scientific metrics to evaluate impact of Upanishads on human personality?
Many ways are there. First, scanning the brains using fMRI, and there are even newer technology, not just fMRI. I'm trying to think. Just read it a few days back, never mind the name, but it is a newer version of fMRI that they're using in West, that is just looking at the scans. But another way is we need all of this to be able to convince others for research. If we are just looking for ourselves at an individual basis, I'll give you a formula which is going to be really easy to put in rather than going into all this technology, We can take anything as a yardstick. The most important is our emotions, emotion regulation, right? Especially when it comes to interpersonal relationships, always that is the hardest thing. So when we are trying to train our emotions, regulate our emotions, let us say anger management. The formula you have to use is FIR, FIR in this country stands for a different thing. We all know that. But here, F stands for frequency, I stands for intensity, R for the recovery period. The frequency of angry outbursts will reduce as we are doing japa, meditation and all of that. The intensity of the anger outburst will be reduced, and even if frequency and intensity are not reduced, the most important thing, even before frequency and intensity, is the R, recovery period. If we can recover from that angry outburst as quickly as possible without having any deleterious effects like before starting meditation, that is the surest way. And before anybody can see the changes in the anger management in us, we will be able to figure out if we can use this formula, FIR.
Sir, ma'am, one more question. So, as we are going through the presentation, again, you, whatever you said was so amazing, and I was going through one line by line. So, at one point in time, you said, US, there is a lot of research going on in the neuro side, and there is not much in India, because most of them, I feel like you said, right, in the medical sciences field or the medical education.
I didn't say it's not happening in India.
So,
I didn't say that.
Yeah, but as it is not part of the education system, and so as we read in many of the books or we go through, we can say that eastern part of the world is more of spiritual or culturally rooted, and Western was always into that, industrial or mostly capitalistic. So what could have been the thought or the vision behind people going for the neuroscience, and why would they go more into it?
Great question. By the way, I didn't compare the two, but definitely it started in West, not just in US, in Europe too, because Dalai Lama posed that challenge to the Western neuroscientists at that time, and we did not have the capability at that time. I'm talking about a couple of decades back. We didn't have that kind of fMRI machines to be able to do that kind of work that now we have. Now there is a lot of research that is happening, and not just in this. Most of the research actually starts from West. That does not bother me, but for especially things like that, the seed is going from here. Right? They are trying to prove. We don't even need to prove because we have experienced it within ourselves. But it is important to prove because now it can spread to many more people. That is how the global consciousness gets affected in a positive manner. That is how the expansion of consciousness, global consciousness can happen, and it has to reach that tipping point, it's a Malcolm Gladwell book, Tipping Point. It has to reach a tipping point, and I feel it has reached to a certain level, and we need couple more tipping points like that for it to en masse make a change. Even now, the new neuroscience research that has happened in West, started in West, it has actually spread in all different fields. It hasn't stayed in neuroscience. It has come to the business field, economics, especially in AI, thinking about the ethical part. I keep discussing this with many of the AI experts in US whenever I go there. So it has actually seeped into all walks of life, so as to say.
Is there any study has been done whether it has genetically linked this plasticity change, or whether can be inherited to the next generation, that good change in plasticity can be inherited to the next generation? If it is a genetically defined, means you are telling about it's a neurochemical, neurotransmitters. So all these things are being transmitted or genetically determined. So is there any change in genetic profile with
Yeah.
I have an associated question with sir, like it's a
Sure.
very interesting question.
Go ahead.
Like I was a warden of the college and I have observed, what I have observed is, like this is genetical, like most of the times we are reflections of our parents' genetics and it gets exposed like in different stages. Like when we see in our framework, like when students pass to PU, it's something different. When they pass to undergrad, something else comes. So is there any scientific way, like as sir
Yeah.
asked, to regulate it, like as you said, in a different periods of life?
Great question. Yes, both of them. I have not looked into the recent research, but my interest is also in this, and I will share my views on this. Yes, absolutely, there has to be. In a lighter manner, you know, I used to say this, oh, there is a spiritual gene, that's what gets transmitted. No, not that anybody has identified a spiritual gene, but in an esoteric way, we can understand this way. However, I'll give you a roundabout answer to this question. Let me just finish this thought. That is a roundabout way. Now, in epigenetic research, okay, yeah, epigenetic research, okay, good. Whether or not there was influence, there is always a mixture of both nurture and nature influence, right? And by providing the environment like it is happening here, this is a perfect place to study epigenetic research, and that is why you're here, doctor. So absolutely, as much as the nature, the genes may have a major role, by providing something beyond the genes, that means the external environment can actually change. And then we know in some of the studies, usually this is done in pathological diseases, not the way we are expecting right now. If they have looked into the telomeres, the research on telomeres, how it can affect the outcome of cancer, especially breast cancer. So that research has been done. And it is not, we have not even started because there is so much, the ideas are so much. To be able to prove this, it takes so much time. That is why they asked me to stay back and do some of these work in US. But for me to be doing the work in US, this was where I was looking at the idea was to involve caregivers in the treatment of chronic illnesses, but for me to be doing that, to be writing grants and to be waiting for the grants and to prove, I knew this is what it is, so I did not even want to wait and prove there, and that is the reason I came back here. And that is the first thing we did. Our first project was to include caregivers in the treatment of people with chronic illnesses. And the treatment is, what we gave is all non-pharmacological. And even now, the last year's recent project that we did is to treat people with depression in a non-pharmacological way. Just like this, we made the people understand about how the brain works, how the mind works. How can you change the imbalance of chemicals by changing your thought patterns? It was like a 55-hour neuroscience course that was given for the people with the, depression, and we followed them up along with the caregiver for 1 whole year. It was literally done as a clinical trial, but without any kind of complete approval, so we cannot share the data. That is the only thing. But we have the data to prove that it is possible. And the external environment is now, again, including caregivers for the treating people with chronic illnesses. And there are only few diseases that can be cured. And we have doctors here, they can attest to that. Most of them are illnesses that cannot be cured. They are chronic illnesses, but they can be healed. There's a huge difference between curing and healing. This is what we have been doing and studying and experiencing for the past 15 years in this culture.
The West is more interested in curing, and we are more interested in healing, because curing has more money than healing.
Ma'am, it was a very wonderful session. Before going forward with the word of thanks, I would just like to make two confessions. So first thing, I had a semester of human physiology and anatomy, and I had actually skipped. And after listening to talk, I have decided that I'll go back and start reading it, because now I regretted it. And the second, and my second confession is that actually I had thought that I should have made a small summary of the full talk and give a report of what and all happened today. I thought I'll sit there and I'll do it. But your talk was so good, ma'am, that I forgot about it and I started listening to your talk. It was so good. It was so captivating, I'm telling you, ma'am. Thank you very much for coming here. I thank all the organizers who have brought ma'am here. I'm very it has influenced me a lot now, and I'm very sure the points which you gave, especially the student tips and everything, it is going to stay with us for a very long time. And normally what happens to us is, ma'am, whenever we given this same tips in other way, we don't normally okay this is, but when come it through scientific and this comes, it becomes very valid. And I thank all the students who are there offline here, and also those who have joined online in this journey of knowledge and evolution, as ma'am said, and to all the audiovisual people who are here. And now I would like to request Shambhunath sir to please hand over our token of gratitude to ma'am. Please. I'm very sure that we'll have many more such interactions, and please keep coming, ma'am, so that we can interact with you and gain some more wisdom from your vast experience. Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll end with Shanti Mantra. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.